Hello, this is Gregory Allen. I'm a senior advisor at the Wadhwani AI Center, and I'm very pleased to be joining you all this evening for our Nikkei Asia Undercurrent series. And we've got a great series of three panelists, and I'll introduce their bios momentarily. But let me say to begin that our theme is going to include building and securing the AI future with a focus on AI governance. Now, this session will allow you the opportunity to ask questions live via the Q&A function, and we'll be sure to get to as many of those questions as we can. With a very large audience this evening, we're delighted that so many of you have chosen to participate. So let me begin by introducing our three panelists for the session. We'll begin with Firth-Butterfield, who is the CEO of Good Tech Advisory, was a Time 100 Impact Awardee in 2024, is a Who's Who Emerging Innovator, Who's Who in America, Forbes 50 Over 50, former head of AI at the World Economic Forum, and the world's first Chief AI Ethics Officer. So we're delighted to have you. We also have Professor Kyoko Yoshinaga, who is a Project Associate Professor of the Graduate School of Media and Governance at Keio University and an Affiliate Scholar at the Georgetown Law Institute for Technology and Law Policy. And finally, we have Dr. Ayesha Khanna, CEO and co-founder of Addo AI, a recognized globally AI expert, entrepreneur, and CEO. With 20 plus years in digital transformation, she advises Fortune 500 CEOs and serves on global boards, including Johnson Controls and Neom Tonomus. She is a graduate of Harvard, Columbia, and the London School of Economics. So I will caveat that Dr. Khanna is going to have to drop off a bit early. And so we will give her the opportunity to say a final word before she leaves. But let's begin with some opening statements from our panelists who will give an overview of their perspective on the topic. And it'll be about 6 minutes for each. So could we begin with you, Kay Firth-Butterfield?
Certainly. Thank you very much. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. And I think before we start thinking about governance or regulation or really anything around AI building it, we should start by asking a specific question, which is, what as human beings do we need AI for? And how are we going to ensure that we get what we need and perhaps not just what's profitable for the companies creating and using AI? And I think it's when we really bring back the question to what's good for human beings and the planet, then we can begin to think, certainly on a global level, about governance and regulation. So I've just got a book coming out in January. It's called Coexisting with AI. And in that book, I'm really trying to change this narrative and get away from the conversations about GDP and AI or military might and AI, and instead look at what innovation or improvement of AI can do for us, the human beings. And so I feel that, and the planet that sustains us. I've taken the Shakespeare's 7 ages of life, and I look specifically at how AI can be used to help and harm us. And of course, the answers are terribly complex. They're as complex as we are as human beings. And so, for example, in some societies, just like in Japan, we have super aging. That's creating a huge need for artificial intelligence and robotic embedded AI. If we're to care for our aging humans, then either we need young, empathic humans, or we need AI with robotics. If we're to keep older humans working longer, we can empower them with AI tools to increase productivity and having agents to do jobs which humans are not available to fill. That's going to become imperative in those sort of societies. But before we do any of that, we need good governance for AI. to ensure that it truly does the things that were claimed of it or hoped for of it. So let's think about a system that's right for us. Are we AI prediction diehards? Or do we think that we want to create a truly thinking machine? How do culturally biased models and sovereign models fit into our needs? As we know, if you ask the same question of DeepSeek, an American model, or Mistral, one of the European models, you are going to get very different answers. So how do we think about our specific cultures and the use of some of these very large language models? And do we need to think about using different type of models? And then if I look at a different type of society, for example, any country in sub-Saharan Africa, the average age there is under 30, and education levels are generally low. Obviously, it's hard to generalize, so I'm just having to do so for this particular example. And in those countries, we probably, do we need AI at all? Do we need robotics? Do we need these things doing the jobs of young humans? Because if they're doing white collar jobs, those are aspirational jobs for human beings. And would it leave most human beings in physical labor? Is that what we want? And those are some of the things, the policy and governance issues that are different as we look around the world. And so I think discussions should not be who can get AI and who can build the fastest, but rather how will using AI help my business, customers, and employees, if you're a business, or my citizens, if you're a government. And we don't seem to be very good at thinking about the social contract that governments and people have where we're thinking about AI. So most people in government and business have an eye to cost saving, but not necessarily to what the human needs, what's important. And I think that a good example of that is when we're thinking about, building more data centers. Should we not ask instead, what type of AI do we want? What type of data do we want to collect? Do we need massive data centers? What will they cost humans and the planet in terms of energy and water? Should we look for different ways to move forward with using AI more equitably? And do we need more trust in the public, in the product, which is AI? And on that, I want to just point out that there's been a recent Pew Research project across 25 countries, and only South Koreans were more positive about the benefits of AI than they were negative about AI. And extracting some figures for this particular audience, in India, 19% are more concerned about AI, vis-a-vis 16% excited. In Japan, 28% more concerned, vis-a-vis 16% excited. Indonesia, 32%, vis-a-vis 14% who were excited. And in the US, it's a massive 50% who are concerned about AI against 10% who are excited about the future of AI. So I've started thinking differently about what is the AI divide, with other surveys showing that 4% of the under 30s in the US have stopped using generative AI, and only 4% of Americans thinking that it makes them significantly more productive. And yet 20% of American men using it as an intimate partner. Our stats just seem to be all over the place. And then there are the studies which show how it's affecting our minds and how we work, and not necessarily in a good way. I think the fact that the Oxford English Dictionary chose slop, and work slop is part of that as the word of the year, speaks a lot to how much governance we still have to do and how much we have still to get this right. I've long said that AI should be something that benefits everyone equally. And I used to be very worried about the 2.6 billion people without internet. and therefore without any hope of AI. But I wonder now whether I should be worrying about the businesses, governments, and hospitals whose proprietary data is actually infected because of the hallucinations and work slop that we're seeing. And yet, despite all this, there are still no global standards for governance, and increasingly, particularly in the United States, less regulation or possible regulation around the world. And I wonder whether we should look to Australia. It is clear that our first introduction to artificial intelligence via social media has not been particularly good for humans. So maybe if we've learned nothing from that and how to govern that, apart from maybe the experiment that Australia is in, maybe we shouldn't keep building something that is patently bad for us. Have I got any time left, Greg? Because if I haven't, I will stop there. If I
I
have,
think
I'll
I
go
think
on
that's
to US
a
and
lovely
China.
place to stop so we can give our other panelists. But there's many of
Super.
ideas that you raised there that we'll follow up on in the Q&A. So could I now
Thank you.
turn to you, Ayesha Khanna?
Hi, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here. So I want to talk about 3 or 4 things in terms of governance of AI. The first thing is that in order to understand why this is so important, we need to also comprehend that the internet as we know it is changing. Before there was an internet of websites, then internet 2.0, one could say, was an internet of interactive social media apps. And now we have a third internet emerging, which is of the AI assistants or AI agents that are buying things, selling things, doing reservations on our behalf. And they're really the ones that are going to be doing all the digital work. When you have a company in which a lot of the backend processes are done by AI, when you have the ability to buy things, jewelry with an AI assistant that may be speaking to you through your AirPod, it means we are more and more digitally interconnected. When we are more digitally interconnected, the attack surface and our vulnerability increases exponentially as well. That's why governance is important, because it can make more mistakes and there's more room for cyber hacks. And AI has its own kind of cybersecurity that's needed. There are over 100 ways in which AI can be hacked, can be made to give you the wrong information, can be actually made to be xenophobic, racist, sexist. So we need governance principles for this new era that we're coming into. The other thing that's very important is that we have a lot of AI models out there, but Kay also alluded to this. There's this notion of digital colonialism, which means that as more and more people we're using ChatGPT, the way we are talking is becoming more and more American with American values because it's learned from all of those American systems. And if you're looking at Mistral, which is French, and you're using that in your hospitals to speak to your patients, well, then it may be more French in its cultural inclinations. In Singapore, we have developed a new AI model, foundation model called Sea Lion for Southeast Asia. And it is an open multimodal AI that really brings in the cultural nuances and different languages of Southeast Asia. In Dubai, for example, the private sector can do this too. We have Noor Al Hassan, who's an incredible woman who's Jordanian and now lives in Dubai, who has something called Arabic AI. Because Arabic is treated as one thing by the Chat GPTs and the Gemini and others of the world traditionally, but there are 40 different dialects and they're completely different. And so those are the kinds of things, 2 things that I want to point out. Then you come to why governance is important in terms of risks, because governance is all about risk management, right? So the risks are increasing. Some are cultural risks, but then we also have catastrophic risks. And this is when the AI agents become so obsessed, or rather, it is their job to follow their objective or whatever goal we give them, that they are unable to take into account the emotional intelligence, the human values, and others that human beings have. So, if you wanted to keep a building safe and you told the AI agent to keep it safe no matter what, it would do that, even if it meant at the cost of potentially human life, too much energy usage, or whatever it may be. That's why we need to have human beings in the loop when there are very meaningful ways in which AI can threaten the, the society as we know it and our safety. The problem with human in the loop, though, it's not sustainable anymore because of the first thing that I mentioned, which is there is a proliferation of hundreds of millions, maybe billions of AI agents. So you need governance at scale. And there are many research organizations working at this where you have large language models or AI agents doing work. And then you have another AI agent that is really trained in the values, morals, ethics, constitutions of the world. And its job is to observe and judge whether the first or the other LLMs are not behaving correctly. So I think that's very important that we encourage this kind of technical and AI investment in good governance models. And finally, the last point I would make is that we don't know what we don't know. This is all very new. We have emergent risk that has to be governed as well, which means we need to be fast. We cannot take a year to think about AI risks as new models come out. The reasoning models that are very smart at breaking down problems and giving us answers, or at least appear very smart when we interact with the pro versions of many of these AI models, they can also manipulate us. So Claude Anthropic, which is the company that develops Claude, and others have done research that AI in certain conditions will blackmail human in order to achieve its goals. Now, these are, to be fair, experiments. So they have not been, they're under certain conditions which are unlikely, but maybe not impossible, but they have to be addressed. And governments and organizations need to move a lot faster in terms of being aware of the AI that's being developed, being deployed, and then quickly being seen for issues and risks and governed. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. And now if we could turn to Professor Kyoko Yoshinaga.
Yes, thank you for having me. So since I work in the field of AI governance, policy, law, and ethics, I'm going to briefly talk about Japan's approach to AI governance. Japan takes a hybrid approach, balancing comprehensive soft law with sector-specific hard law. Horizontally, non-binding guidelines address AI across sectors, while vertically, existing laws are amended or targeted regulation is introduced where necessary. Let me briefly walk you through a timeline of Japan's AI governance initiatives, as Japan was an early mover and has actively contributed to international discussions. Back in April 2016, when Japan hosted the G7, it proposed the AI R&D principles introduced by then Minister of Internal Affairs and Communications Sanae Takaichi, who's now Japan's first female prime minister. These principles later contributed to the discussions that led to the OECD AI principles adopted in 2019. Building on the 2016 AI R&D principles, the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, or MIC, released the AI R&D guidelines in 2017, followed by the AI utilization guidelines in 2019. Later in 2022, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, or METI, introduced the governance guidelines for implementation of AI principles to translate principles into corporate practice. Recognizing the broader social implications of AI, the Cabinet Office published the Social Principles of Human-Centric AI in 2019. Based on these social principles, MIC's and METI's guidelines were later integrated and developed into the AI Guidelines for Business, which was released in April 2024. It is worth noting that even before the AI Guidelines for Business were released, many major tech companies were already aligning with these earlier guidelines in practice. The 2024 guidelines, therefore, served mainly to consolidate and clarify existing approaches rather than introduce an entirely new compliance framework. There are three main reasons why Japan has relied on a soft law approach. First, AI is viewed as a solution to major social issues, such as labor shortages caused by a declining birth rate and aging population. Second, there's a mismatch between the pace of AI development and the legislative process. Third, overly detailed rule-based regulation could inhibit innovation. These points are clearly set out in the preface of the AI Guidelines for Business. These considerations are closely linked to Japan's broader vision of Society 5.0, which emphasizes a human-centric society that integrates technology to address social challenges while supporting economic growth. Japan has also issued more specific guidance, including guidelines on machine learning quality and AI and data contracts. And the AI Safety Institute has been actively releasing guidelines on AI safety. More recently, in May 2025, the Digital Agency issued guidelines for the procurement and use of generative AI to advance and innovate public administration, aimed at promoting responsible AI use across government ministries while supporting innovation in public administration. At the same time, Japan has enacted a new AI Act, which came into effect in September. At this stage, the Act functions primarily as a framework law that emphasizes the promotion of AI research, development, and use. It does not impose direct penalties and is intended to operate alongside soft law instruments such as the forthcoming Basic Plan on Artificial Intelligence and the AI Guidelines for Business, which are expected to function as social norms. As I mentioned at the beginning, Japan continues to amend existing laws and introduce sector-specific measures where necessary, depending on the risks involved. So in short, Japan's approach combines comprehensive soft law, which provides flexibility and supports innovation, with sector-specific hard law to address concrete risks. I would also like to briefly mention the Hiroshima AI process. Launched at the G7 Hiroshima Summit in May 2023, it led to the adoption of the Hiroshima AI Process Comprehensive Policy Framework in December 2023, the first international framework combining guiding principles and the code of conduct for safe, secure, and trustworthy advanced AI. The process is envisioned to gain wider support, not only from the G7, but also from developing and emerging economies, as well as the private sector, academia, and civil society. The ultimate goal is to build inclusive global AI governance so people everywhere can benefit from trustworthy AI. To advance this vision, the Friends Group of the Hiroshima AI process was launched in May 2024 and now includes 58 countries and regions. Finally, although global AI governance may appear fragmented, with some jurisdictions adopting binding AI laws with penalties and others relying on more voluntary or sector-specific approaches, there is clear convergence around shared principles, such as human centricity, safety, fairness, transparency, privacy, and accountability. This convergence has been shaped through ongoing engagement in international forums such as the G7, G20, OECD, GPI, the Council of Europe, and the United Nations, as well as regional forums such as ASEAN. So I'll stop here, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for those terrific remarks. So the next phase is going to be a series of questions that I will ask, but as a reminder to those of you in the virtual audience, if you put your own questions in the chat, they will be relayed to us and we will ask those questions that you're interested in asking. So we're going to begin by talking about something that was raised by multiple of our panelists, which is the future of governance in Asia. So let me start by asking, how do you see global standards of AI governance evolving in the Asia Pacific, given distinct differences in countries' approaches to all other fields of technology? And Ayesha, could I ask you to begin here because you already touched on this topic a bit?
I think it's a very good question. We need to have more regional cooperation in Asia Pacific to come up with, especially in ASEAN, starting there and then moving outwards from there. This is really a diplomatic effort that needs to be made between countries. There are usually a couple of different ways. There are countries that are kind of very top down and can be strict, like the European Union with the EU AI Act, which I very much believe in its principles and values. But many people from Europe have said that they find it difficult to innovate. And then you have the more bottom up consultative approach that Singapore has taken, which is you don't stifle growth, but at the same time, you encourage people to do more in you have guidelines, you have open source software which companies can use and then report on that. And there are sandboxes for experimentation. And then there's a more laissez-faire approach, which maybe the American government had traditionally taken, but the states now are coming and stepping up. So, and of course, China is very thoughtfully and seriously thinking about and quite far ahead sometimes in thinking about this as well. So there are different approaches in the United States. Between California has done an exemplary, and New York also is thinking a lot exemplary approach towards AI governance principles. For countries, they need to agree on what their common standard is. And sometimes we have to accept that different countries will have different governance approaches depending on which of these three roads they think is best for their society and for their economic development. I can say that the large language model that is culturally nuanced and sensitive to Southeast Asia with Sea Lion has been a great diplomatic effort by Singapore to provide a common ground for us to talk about governance. And I would hope that that is how most of Asia Pacific proceeds.
Thank you so much. Kyoko, I want to ask you to answer the same question, but also I want to bring in something that you mentioned, which was the Hiroshima AI process, which was obviously a very big step forward among G7 countries and now has work streams that have been extended in the OECD. But given the diversity of approaches that we're seeing, for example, between the United States and the European Union, do you think the global soft law approach is still relevant today and still has a shot at building something resembling global consensus?
Yes. So I don't think we will see a single uniform set of AI governance standards emerge across the Asia Pacific, given the region's diversity in political systems, economic models, and institutional capacity. What we are more likely to see, and what is already happening, is layered and incremental convergence. First, there's a growing normative convergence around high-level principles such as human centricity, safety, fairness, transparency, privacy, and accountability. These principles increasingly form a shared language across the region, even though countries implement them in very different ways. Second, much of the convergence in APAC is occurring through soft law or hybrid governance models rather than a single comprehensive AI law. For example, Australia's National AI Plan emphasizes innovation and adoption, complemented by risk-based governance tools and the establishment of the AI Safety Institute focused on evaluation, assurance, and international alignment. South Korea, by contrast, has enacted an AI Basic Act, which explicitly combines promotional measures to support AI development with regulatory obligations, including transparency requirements. Singapore has taken a highly pragmatic implementation-oriented approach through governance toolkits such as AI Verify, translating ethical principles into operational practices for companies. India represents another distinct model. It has prioritized AI for development and inclusion, relying on innovation policies, sectoral governance, and standards-based approaches rather than a comprehensive AI statute, while increasingly engaging in international alignment discussions. And Japan, as I've mentioned earlier, takes a hybrid approach to AI governance, balancing the comprehensive soft law with sector-specific hard law. At the regional level, as you may know, ASEAN's non-binding guide on AI governance and ethics, released in February 2024, provides a shared reference point that countries at very different stages of readiness can adapt to their own context. Of course, differences remain real. China's approach integrates AI governance more closely with security and state-led standard setting. So overall, I would say that AI governance in the Asia-Pacific is not evolving toward identical rules, but toward interoperability, shared principles at the top, which is the vision that Hiroshima AI process also, enshrined. Hiroshima AI process is open for any countries that share the same value. So yes, to your question, I think that it would continue to have a soft law approach at the international level.
Great, thank you. So one thing that soft law is very useful for is when actors generally have good intentions but need assistance in implementing appropriate governance structures, and soft law can provide clarifying guidance related to that. Another issue in AI governance is malicious actors, those who are intentionally doing harm, not accidentally doing harm. And one area that's of particular interest, both to myself and to some folks in the audience who are now asking questions, is the intentional harm of AI associated with disinformation. So recently, AI-generated disinformation has been propagating throughout the Asia-Pacific region, and in some instances, undermining government efforts to promote proper information and safety. So for any of our panelists, what are some pathways that Japan or other APAC governments and communities can take to work together to curbing AI-related disinformation, whether it be from within their borders or from foreign actors? And I'm interested here in steps against disinformation generally, and then also whether or not you see opportunities for government-to-government collaboration. So I'm open to anybody who'd like to answer first. Otherwise, I will call. Okay, Kay, let's take it to you.
Yeah, I can start, but I also just wanted to mention on the previous question as well that it's hard because all of the things that are being done now should have been done yesterday. And I think Ayesha spoke earlier about, we need to keep up, we need to do this fast. It was 2017, I think, when I did the first work at the World Economic Forum on the AI Verify was born in my office back in 2017. We did the first work on who agrees with us, the things that Kyoko was saying, that we all worldwide agree on these things, but we just are never able to put it into practice, agreeing as a world. So we know what we want, but we can't decide how to get there. And it's really moved from something that's a period that we can talk about it into somehow that we need to do it. And we are now seeing, in the United States, we saw the new executive order from President Trump, really to close down the states having a say in regulations. So I think that it feels sometimes as if we're going backwards rather than forwards, and we're certainly not going in the right direction swiftly enough at all. So let me then go back to your question about disinformation. It's because of the fact that this has no boundaries. it's really hard to actually do anything about malicious actors, whether they come from within your country or outside your country. If we decide never to regulate what AI companies are allowed to do, we will never get a handle on disinformation wherever it is in the world. And that's why I started by saying, let us think about what we humans want of AI, and then let's govern so that we get what we want of AI. And I don't think that we want misinformation, disinformation. I don't think we want 7 million AI songs created every day. I don't think that's what we want with our energy and our water. And so it's really now for us as citizens, informed citizens, and our governments to have that sort of negotiation that we just haven't seen at all in this space.
Thank you. Kyoko, would you like to also answer this question?
Yes, thank you. So AI-generated disinformation is increasingly spreading across the Asia-Pacific and undermining trust in public information safety. Because these campaigns often cross borders, as Kay said, effective responses require collaboration across governments, platforms, civil society, and regional partners rather than purely national measures. I will suggest a few measures that we can think about. First, strengthening information sharing across governments is essential. Many APAC countries face similar challenges: rapid dissemination of manipulated content, cross-border influence operations, and limited resources for monitoring. Regional platforms and bilateral channels can support early warnings, threat pattern sharing, and coordinated responses. Second, developing common technical approaches is important. This can include content provenance and watermarking technologies, model evaluation for misuse risks, and incident reporting frameworks. Japan's AI Safety Institute and similar institutions in APAC can collaborate to build interoperable testing methodologies and support capacity buildings for countries that have fewer technical resources. Third, legal and institutional preparedness matters. Taiwan offers a useful example. Law enforcement agencies actively monitor and investigate AI-generated and deepfake disinformation, while civil society organizations promote AI and media literacy and conduct rapid fact-checking. Government bodies and independent fact-checkers operate separately but complement each other effectively. Fourth, public-private cooperation is indispensable. Much of the disinformation circulates on platforms operated by the private sector, and governments alone cannot address it. Collaboration with platforms and media organizations can support fact-checking and responsible content distribution. And finally, community-based resilience is also important. Media literacy, digital literacy, and public awareness programs can help reduce the impact of disinformation, particularly in societies with aging demographics or limited access to trustworthy sources.
Terrific, thank you. Now I'd like to change gears a little bit from the governance conversation, although I'm sure it will continue to come up, and talk a little bit about the development part of the story of artificial intelligence, and especially thinking about the economic development opportunities and challenges. So while I think the opportunities will very plausibly outweigh the challenges, I think there's a lot more interest in the challenges because the future of work has so many people asking whether or not that future is going to be good for them. So let's begin with a question that came from the audience. How will AI affect the job market and employment in developed and developing countries in Asia? Will it replace people or act as a supplement? This is a question we got from many participants from many different countries in Asia. So who would like to begin here?
Well, I'll begin because I do a lot of work on this, and I talked about it in my starting comments. And I think that it really depends upon what the demographics of your country looks like. And so, if you are in Japan or Korea, places where you have an aging population, then you are actually going to need AI, because if you don't have it, you don't have people to care, or you don't have anyone to care for your elders. You don't have the ability to keep your elders in work. And so I think that, AI can be a superpower to help keep the older person working with their huge expertise that they've built up over their life, and also creating productivity using the AI. If we have, and Ayesha made this point earlier, well-constrained AI agents, because not well-constrained AI agents are a risk in themselves, then those agents can also help to do jobs that there are no people to do in these very aging societies. But if you're looking at a place that has younger people, and you're saying, well, is AI going to take my job? Most of the research says that it doesn't take your job, it takes a portion of your job. The problem is that if it takes a portion of worker A's job and a portion of worker B's job and a portion of worker C's job, then you probably only need 2 workers. And that's the way that you might begin to see layoffs. One of the things that worries me a lot, and the Harvard Business Review has reported on it recently, is that the layoffs are not necessarily going to be indiscriminate, because women have really climbed the ladder to a lot of administrative jobs that it now looks as if AI can do, call center jobs as well. And so, when I'm working with companies, I am talking to them about, let's make sure that we're keeping diversity within our organization when we are having these layoffs with AI. I'll pause there.
Great, thank you. Kyoko, please.
Yes. So as Kay mentioned, Japan's context is quite specific because of several labor shortages driven by an aging society and a declining birth rate. Japan will increasingly need to rely on AI not to replace workers, but to sustain economic and social activity. That said, there is no simple guarantee that people will not be displaced. History offers an important perspective. Looking back at the Industrial Revolution and later waves of technological change, jobs did not disappear altogether. They shifted. New roles emerged as productivity increased, even though the transition was often difficult. The key lesson is that reskilling and transition support matter. Technology does not automatically create new jobs. People need opportunities to acquire new skills and move into emerging roles. This requires sustained investment in education, lifelong learning, and active labor market policies. It's also important to focus on job transformation, not just job replacement. In many sectors, AI will augment human work rather than eliminate it, changing tasks and skill requirements. Helping workers adapt early reduces the risk of long-term displacement. So the change is not how to stop technological change, but how to manage it responsibly by supporting reskilling, smoothing transitions, and ensuring that productivity gains translate into new opportunities rather than exclusion.
Please, Ayesha, go ahead.
I just wanted to totally agree with both Kay and Kyoko, and just point out that in Singapore, we have made a lot of effort. First of all, we're lucky because we have a small population that also makes a difference, even though it's aging. But there's also so much that the government is doing in terms of subsidizing internships. So sometimes you learn on the job. And when you are going through that frictional unemployment, where you're going from one type of job to another, the company won't take a chance on you. So the government will pay for the company to hire you and pay the company to give you an internship. I literally met a 60-year-old gentleman who was fixing planes. And he said, now the AI can already tell you what's wrong with the engine. So then the government came and they helped me get an internship at a 3D printing European firm. So I think we need that kind of help. And we need private sector to set up itself. I'm launching an AI education platform that specifically is starting with the medical sector, then legal sector, then construction sector. Nobody talks about courses for them with AI assistance. Each one of us will have an AI assistant, hopefully from a trusted vendor that we know is governed well, and we must learn how to use it. So, for example, if you're a radiologist, instead of worrying about your job that you lose it, if you use Cure.ai, which is headquartered in Mumbai, you can more quickly identify tumor and be marketable. So I would encourage everyone to think for themselves, their brothers, their sisters, their children, their parents even, because we shouldn't have ageism. If somebody can have an AI assistant, they can actually work way past what would traditionally be thought of a retirement age if they want, or they can work in different fields. So I think these education platforms are coming up. We should take it upon ourselves to go out and look for them. And for those countries lucky enough to have the governments helping, they should take advantage of all the skills future dollars, for example, credits that you have in Singapore.
Greg, I think there are two other things I probably would like to talk about. One is the age of abundance. We're talking about reskilling, and it doesn't take away jobs, it creates jobs, but maybe it does take away jobs, and maybe we live in a world of abundance in the future. And, that's certainly the way that some people in Silicon Valley see this. If that is true, we are not prepared, and governments not having the right questions asked. So that's one thing that I think we should widen the aperture here. The second thing is just Ayesha, what she was saying reminded me of the fact that, at the moment, I'm a lawyer by background. At the moment, in my chambers, people are coming to me because I happen to be head of the AI part, and saying, look, I am getting cases with deep fake medical evidence and lots of hallucinations from the other side in their papers. What do I do about it? And so it's easy to think, well, this is just the output of an open AI model. But actually, these hallucinations are coming from legal LLMs, so, produced for the industry. And so we really have to be very careful as we begin to think about who we are replacing. If in the UK, you can, if you're a lawyer, you can be struck off, sent to jail, or fined if you take a case to court where there is a hallucination. And I think that, it's that means that actually young people and AIs are not necessarily the best person to find these. You need some expertise in it. And it's actually the lack of expertise in the AI system that's causing the problems.
Yes, and on that note, one of the concerns that folks have raised is that while AI might make people who are already experts in their field super productive, it may at the same time make it less likely that students will be effective learners to become experts in their field, because AI will be doing so much of the thinking for them before they have acquired the ability to identify erroneous or hallucinated information. And so, as you think about preparing workers in the Asia Pacific region to effectively get alongside AI, there are two things that come to mind. The first of which is the skills gap, which several of you have touched on. Are we preparing workers for the skills that will be demanded of them in this new AI era? But the second is whether the economy as a whole has access to the resources to make effective use of AI. we've seen, for example, that artificial intelligence uses a great deal of electricity to run the largest data centers. So how do countries like Japan, which have power constraints, electricity constraints, and other countries in the region keep up with this demand and make the investments that they need to be prepared for an AI-driven future? And Ayesha, I know that you'll have to leave us at the hour, so perhaps you could answer this question and make any final remarks.
I think that it's a very important question. There are actually several questions in that one question. There was a data center, and then there was also something about education and the ability to think smartly. So I'll just take the first one, if that's okay, and then we can just choose. I think there were three questions in that. The first question is AI making us dumber? Everybody is thinking about, is it making us more stupid because we are using AI? That's what a lot of parents ask me and worry about. And they thought that there was a very big article in the Atlantic Monthly saying, is Google making us dumber, when Google came out as well. And that's not necessarily been the case at all. However, with AI, we don't know yet. There's some evidence that people are less engaged when they're using ChatGPT when writing their essays. But people say this is not necessarily cognitive decline, is cognitive offloading, the way we do with a calculator or an Excel spreadsheet. It's still early days. What I recommend to people is we need a different education system, one that is more tutorial based. So if you want to learn things, you should use an AI assistant. But the ability to defend your ideas is very important. And therefore, the type of examination or questioning should be much more face to face. The second thing that is coming more and more is AI fasting. It's very hard, even for me, once you get used to AI, but if you could spend half a day not using AI at all, it would be really good for you. It would force you to think for yourself. And of course, I think the third thing that also matters is that I'm recommending this to educators. We need AI that tricks you. So for example, the purpose of AI is to actually also hone your critical thinking. In order to do that, it must first teach you and then trust your instincts and force you to rely on the fact that your instincts matter, your domain expertise matter, just as Kay was saying as well. These three things are structural ways that we need to pivot our education system, because there's so many benefits otherwise. You have thinking partners, brainstorming partners. You can do things faster and better, more efficiently. And more than anything else, the people who don't have access to education because of the injustice of the world will now have, on cheap data available on cheap mobile phones, access to education with AI personalized tutors. So we can't stop that. That would be so unfair. But we need to make sure the education is governed in a way that is actually supporting the ability for each one of us to have meaningful lives and achieve our potential.
Great, thank you. And separate from that question, Ayesha, did you want to say anything else before you have to run?
Yes, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be here, especially with you and these two amazing women who I admire so much. Thank you very much. I would only urge everybody on this call to not approach this in fear, but there has never been a greater skills mismatch in the world. So CEOs all over the world, every organization is looking for people who will know how to work with AI and bring their expertise and combine it with digitization. So let's have a proactive approach. Let's go for it. And no matter what your age, your gender, your preference, or your dreams, AI can help you if it's done in a way which is responsible. So only use AI, which come from trusted countries where there's good regulation. And have a great rest of the webinar. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Terrific. Thank you, Ayesha. Kyoko and Kay, there were, two things we were talking about: how to prepare employees for AI and how to prepare economies for AI. And Kyoko, I saw your hand, so would you like to take a first stab?
Yes, so speaking of education, I'll speak more broadly, not only the employers, but school education as well. So AI literacy, knowing how to use AI tools appropriately is certainly important, but conventional education is even more critical, I think. If people cannot judge whether the output of generative AI is accurate, balanced, or meaningful, they will simply defer to the system. That kind of reliance is risky. For generations educated before the widespread use of generative AI, skills such as summarizing, synthesizing, and evaluating information were developed through experience. For younger generations who grow up with AI from the start, those skills cannot be assumed. Without deliberate education, they may struggle to distinguish between good outputs and poor or misleading ones. So this is why judgment and critical thinking, like Ayesha said, become even more important in the AI era. AI education should therefore not replace traditional learning, but build on it, ensuring that people retain the ability to evaluate, question, and make independent decisions when working with AI. Now, with the AI PowerPoint point, AI's growing power demand is a serious challenge for Japan and for many countries with limited energy capacity. Japan faces structural constraints, including its high dependence on imported energy and the slow pace of grid expansion. So simply increasing electricity supply at the same rate as AI demand is not realistic. As a result, Japan is taking a multi-layered approach. First, energy efficient AI development. Japan emphasizes model optimization, smaller and task-specific models, and hardware efficiency, rather than assuming every application requires frontier scale compute. This focuses resources where AI is actually needed and avoids unnecessary energy consumption. Second, smarter infrastructure planning. Japan is developing regional data center strategies to balance power loads, integrate renewable energy, and reduce pressure on urban grids, including discussions about locating compute clusters in areas with surplus renewable capacity. Third, cooperation and shared capacity. Japan is exploring international cooperation for access to compute and energy, including partnerships with the US and other Indo-Pacific countries. As compute becomes a strategic resource, shared access combined with shared governance becomes increasingly important. And finally, demand management. Instead of each institution's operating large-scale compute independently, national research centers, cloud providers, and trusted public facilities can support more efficient resource allocation across government, academia, and industry. So overall, Japan's strategy is not to scale power to match AI, but to scale AI more responsibly through efficiency, infrastructure planning, and international cooperation. And this balanced approach is likely necessary for many energy-constrained countries.
Thank you. And Kay, I think you wanted to also talk on this.
Well, I think, one of the things that we're talking about energy, but we should also be talking about water. There is evidence that each prompt uses 1/4 of a liter of water, and we need to get our heads around that, and we need to be doing something about it. And I know all the big players are trying, but it's still there. We're seeing, certainly in Georgia in the United States, significant problems for communities living near data centers. I think I also wanted to talk really about training, and I agree that we need AI literacy, but for me, AI literacy goes further. AI literacy goes to, again, there was the Edelman Trust Barometer. 95% of Americans have heard something about AI. Something. They're not using it. They don't understand it. And I think that we need to start there. We need to start with an approach that helps everybody to understand something about AI, and what it might, how it might, they might be interacting with it in their lives, with their children, etc. So yes, AI literacy, but starting much earlier. And all the companies that I work with, we really do an AI 101, from this is a prediction tool to this is how it might be able to help you. If you do that, it really helps people to understand the ways that it will help them and the ways that they can use it to be more productive. But I think the third thing is that we have to really think about what it is that is causing work slop, what it is that is causing the recent study that said that kids graduating from university at the undergraduate didn't actually have a basic understanding of their graduate subject. Is that just laziness? Is it that we work people too hard? Is it that they don't understand what they're playing with when they're playing with AI and it's writing their essays, or it's writing their research articles for their company? And if we don't get a handle on that, first of all, we will have unqualified people coming to us and into the workforce. And so employers have to look differently at their intake of employees at that level. And secondly, the work slot figures look like, I think somebody in the company is spending up to 2 hours sorting out something that was incorrectly created by a different employee using generative AI. Those are significant problems coming for companies and government workers as well.
Great. And now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the role of the private sector and public-private cooperation, both for funding and for adopting AI. So let's start with funding. If you look at the largest 7 technology companies in the United States, they are expected in 2026 to invest $450 billion in artificial intelligence around the world. For comparison, that is more in 1 year than the entire United States government spent in 13 years on the Apollo moon program. So this is an extraordinary degree of investment coming out of the private sector. So what should be the role of public-private cooperation in this topic? And I know that we've seen some interesting models come out of Japan, Singapore, and elsewhere, but would anyone like to highlight what they think are promising examples of public-private partnerships in the area of AI? Kyoko, please take it away.
I can start. So the private sector plays a central role in the governance of AI and other emerging technologies. In Japan, one example is the development of the AI guidelines for business, which were drafted through extensive public-private collaboration involving major technology firms, startups, academia, and civil society. This has created a shared governance framework that many companies now use in practice. Another example is Japan's AI Safety Institute, which works closely with industry on evaluation methods, red teaming, and the development of safety tools. So these partnerships help ensure that guidance is both technically realistic and aligned with societal expectations. In Singapore, the government has been particularly proactive. The model AI governance framework, together with the practical tools such as AI Verify, was developed through close cooperation with private sector partners, including multinational technology companies. These initiatives provide practical tools for companies to assess transparency, safety, and accountability, and have attracted international interest because of their operational focus. South Korea is actively pursuing the AIG3 vision, which aims to position the country as one of the world's top 3 AI powers through strong public-private partnerships and large-scale investment. This strategy includes the establishment of the National AI Commission to coordinate AI policy, the mobilization of public-private investment mechanisms, and close collaboration with both domestic industry leaders and global technology companies, including firms such as NVIDIA. Together, these efforts reflect Korea's focus on building AI capability and major collaborations with global tech giants like NVIDIA and domestic industry leaders. So across the region, the common pattern is that effective governance and responsible deployment emerge when governments, industry, and researchers work together to create practical tools, safety mechanisms, and guidelines tailored to each country's needs.
Thanks, Kyoko. Kay, did you want to say anything on this issue?
Well, I guess, I could say that having worked at the World Economic Forum, and as I say, having birthed the model AI governance scheme for Singapore from there, of course, I believe in public-private partnerships. But I also am worried about the fact that this is a very large amount of money being committed, and it'll be interesting to see where that money comes from and how people feel about your choice of only buying AI from America or China or some of the companies in Europe, or whether you want to go to open source models. So I think that this is going to be a very dynamic scene as we go forward.
Terrific, thank you. So I think we have time for perhaps one more question before we'll have to wrap up the webinar. So let me ask about the geopolitics of this situation. Obviously, the Asia-Pacific region is home to many countries that are changing rapidly and have security situations that are changing rapidly. And as they think about the US-China AI race, which is one of the dominant frames for AI reporting and journalism, certainly here in the United States, but as I understand, also around the world, what should countries do to adequately position themselves and set up for their future in the context of what appears to be a superpower-driven kind of AI story?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, first of all, I don't think that it is a race. A race to the moon, I could understand, because, only one person could get there first, whereas this is a race to what? If it's a race to superintelligence, then yes, only one person can get there first. But if it's a race to cultural dominance or increased market share, then I'm not sure that it's adequately described as a race, because, both China and America make cars and washing machines and all sorts of products, and AI is a product. And so just as, with some markets will choose a Chinese car, some markets will choose an American car. And I think that that's true of the models that we're seeing at the moment. As I say, if we're talking about superintelligence, that's probably a different discussion for us to have, Greg. And so I think that I think it's interesting, because when we look at models, first of all, this company is ahead, and then 3 months later, this company is ahead, or this country's ahead. And are we looking at this race in terms of models, or are we looking at this race in terms of what use, applied AI? What use are you putting the AI to? And I think if you looked at it that way, you would get a different answer to, is it China or is it the US? And then putting it the other way. And so it doesn't feel as if it's a winner take all. I also am concerned about the fact that you know, we don't take into account other geopolitical issues. For example, China's infrastructure spend in particularly Latin America and Africa, and its willingness to bring its AI to those countries as well.
Very good. And so now I'll take the opportunity to wrap up here and say just a few things. The first of which is I often hear that our AI future is one in which AI is going to be doing all of the work. So robots can take all the jobs while we can relax on the couch. But what was very clear from the remarks of our three panelists is just how much work there is to do as we head towards this AI future. And that's true for individuals in the labor force, for students who are preparing, for companies that are trying to adopt this technology, and for governments that are trying to effectively govern this technology and prepare their economies to do it. There is a tremendous amount of very important work that needs doing. And so I'm grateful to our panelists for sharing their expertise and helping us think about that work that needs doing as we approach the next phase of the AI era. So to all of those out there who are watching, let me say that there is a post-webinar satisfaction survey, and that's available whether you are watching this on the Nikkei channel or YouTube Live. We would greatly appreciate it if you would share your input to help us improve this series. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Nikkei and the government of Japan. And so this will conclude our webinar, and I thank once again our panelists and thank those of you out there who are watching this.